The movie opens on a Turkish train, where Robert Mkal is on his own mission to retrieve a child who was kidnapped by a father from his mother who was also his ex-wife. Robert then followed the child's father to a bar room, where Robert discovered that his father was a gangster.
No intention of returning the child.
When the father realized Robert's mission, he immediately ordered his men to kill Robert. But of course, on the contrary, Robert very easily killed 3 of his men. After the murder, Robert approached the father and gave him the opportunity to hand over his daughter to his ex-wife.
Send C.G. Dixon.
Long story short, Robert then took the little girl to a lawyer's office in Boston, where her mother, Grace, was very happy after finding his daughter had returned in good health.
Okay.
Robert now no longer works in a building shop, but works as an online car driver. He has a loyal customer who is an old man named Sam Rubenstein, where Sam is working on a case to find his long-lost sister.
Welcome to the club.
Apart from that, Robert also often interacts with several other passengers, who each have their own life problems.
Be there to pick you up when you get back.
Yes, sir.
After looking for money, Robert then returned to his new apartment, and has many neighbors, including Fatima, who likes farming. Meanwhile in Belgium, a member of the GIA government agent named Calbert, had just returned home and found his wife beaten by 3 men named Resnick, Ari, and Kovac. The 3 men killed Calbert's wife for no reason, and after that shot Calbert dead through his mouth.
Open your mouth.
The next night Robert received an order from a young man who told Robert to bring home a woman named M.E. But on the way, Robert discovered that M.E. had been drugged and possibly raped. Out of pity, Robert took him to the nearest hospital, but something unexpected happened, where Robert went to the young man's apartment and asked what exactly they had done to the woman. Robert gave them the option to confess and give them the cell phone or camera they used to record the actions they had committed. But these young people who pretend to be good at it actually choose things that make them miserable. Where they initially intended to beat up Robert, but instead they were the ones who were beaten up by Robert. One of the young men looked scared, then Robert broke the man's finger which he was using to grope the woman's body, until the man winced in pain.
Make sure I get a 5-star.
After finishing having fun, Robert went home. And somehow a close friend of his agency named Susan was already inside. They also had dinner together while talking about their lives. If you have watched the first The Equalizer, you will definitely remember that Susan and her husband Brian were the ones who helped Robert. And among the people who knew Robert before, only the 2 of them knew that Robert was still alive. After dinner, Susan said goodbye, because that evening she was going to attend a meeting.
These things, and I'm the only friend you got.
The next morning Robert was shocked to find that his neighbor's garden was a mess, and the walls were covered in graffiti. The vandalism was carried out by delinquent children there. Robert, who did not remain silent, decided to try to clean up the graffiti. Not long after, one of his other neighbors, named Miles, offered to clean all the graffiti on the walls for a reasonable price. Robert, who basically wants to help the people around him, is happy to accept it. A little information: Miles is a student at an arts university and he lives alone in a rented house. To make ends meet, he works odd jobs. Then the film moves to Susan's residence, where she is in the middle of a video call with 2 of her agency colleagues, namely Dave and his boss. They discuss the death of the husband and wife that we saw at the beginning of the film, where the husband's name is Calbert, is one of the members who works in their agency. Therefore, the agency's superiors ordered Susan and Dave to investigate the case. The film moves to Brussels, Belgium, where Dave and Susan are investigating the crime scene, to uncover the facts behind the deaths of the husband and wife. Feeling too tired, Dave and Susan decided to return to the inn and will continue their duties the next day. When they were about to enter the elevator, they saw two young men entering with them. Because Dave and Susan's rooms were on different floors, they finally separated. When Susan was about to enter her room, suddenly the two young men pushed Susan's body, causing her to hit her head. Without saying much, the two young men committed violence against Susan without mercy. Even though she had put up resistance, Susan's life could not be saved.
Since, we're gonna make this pop out, I'll sign my work.
On the other hand, Robert, who was monitoring Miles painting the walls, was suddenly called by Brian, Susan's husband, who informed him that Susan had been murdered. Hearing this, Robert flew to Washington, D.C. to attend Susan's funeral. But he sat at a distance because the other GM members still thought Robert was dead. After the funeral was over, Brian gave some of Susan's identities to Robert. Here, Brian felt strange because Susan didn't bring any treasure at all, and all she brought was her wedding ring. This is of course a question mark, because a real robber would definitely not kill Susan because of a wedding ring that only weighed 2 grams.
Except for this, do everything in their power. I don't know what to do now. I knew whoever it was.
Meanwhile, in an apartment, we are shown the two men who killed Susan. The two men suddenly got an unknown call. And when they picked it up, suddenly the radio in their room exploded, killing the two young men. It turns out that the people who bombed them were Resnick, Kovac, and Ari. The three ordered the two men to kill Susan, and eliminate them both in order to eliminate information. The next day, Robert deliberately visited Washington Park to meet Dave, who was very surprised and touched because Robert was still alive. The two then discussed Susan's death and the murder of the two perpetrators. Where here Robert gives his analysis, that Susan's death must be related to Calbert's murder.
Floor she was on. Backpackers got on first. She never pushed a button, Dave.
After meeting Dave, Robert returned to the apartment to monitor Miles, who was painting. But at the same time, two gangsters suddenly came and took Miles away. Without thinking, Robert followed the gangster to his apartment. There he beats up some gangsters and takes his gun to force Miles back with him.
Let's go, Miles.
It turns out that the reason Miles is here is because the gangsters will help him take revenge on the thugs who killed his brother. But Robert explains that Miles should not be friends with gangsters.
5 pounds of pressure, that's all it takes. You know how to hold it?
The next day, Robert returned to take a passenger to the airport. The passenger said he was going home to attend his daughter's birthday. Robert, who was suspicious from the start, tried to make a roundabout route, where the route was not to the airport. But the passenger never complained to him. Robert casually asked about his intentions and goals. The passenger, who felt that his cover had been exposed, immediately took out a knife to injure Robert. Despite repeated attempts, the passenger was unable to injure Robert, who could only resist while controlling the car. By using his multitasking skills and predictive analysis, Robert was able to kill the passenger easily and quite astonishingly. After taking the passenger's cell phone, Robert burned the car and the passenger's body inside to remove any traces of his violence. Then the film moves to the residence of Dave and his family, where Robert suddenly comes to visit there. Without saying much, Robert provided evidence regarding Susan's death. And the most surprising thing was that Robert already knew that Dave was the one behind all the problems. Dave was suddenly shocked and didn't expect that Robert would quickly be able to gather evidence of his depravity. Because it was discovered, Dave admitted that since Robert's fake death he had been expelled from the government agency. And to make ends meet he worked for someone to become a professional hitman. Initially, Dave was only ordered to kill Calbert and his wife. However, because Susan was investigating the case, Dave, who initially didn't want to do it, was forced to kill his best friend so that his depraved secret wouldn't be discovered. And this is called money is more important than friends. And what surprised him most was that Dave was not alone. He was helped by 3 friends from his agency who also knew Robert. And it turns out they are Resnick, Kovac, and Ari. Knowing this fact, Robert casually approached them and threatened to kill them one by one. After Robert left, The three of them went straight to Susan's house to finish off Brian. But they lost quickly because Robert had secured Brian by hiding him in a hotel. Not at their wits' end, where they immediately went to Robert's house. And at that time Miles was painting the walls of his kitchen. Robert, who knew about this, ordered Miles to hide in the secret room behind his bookcase. But the instincts of an experienced agent cannot be fooled. Where Dave already knew that there was someone in the house. Robert, who saw it on CCTV, tried to divert attention by calling and challenging Dave to a duel at his old house on the beach.
He's going home.
When Dave and one of his colleagues left, Miles immediately left the room. But when he was about to leave the house, it turned out that Dave was still there and immediately kidnapped Miles. Meanwhile, Robert arrived at his hometown, which had been evacuated, because at that time there was a windstorm. Not long after, Dave and his three colleagues came to find Robert.
Next house is back there.
Dave, who turned out to be a skilled sniper, then climbed to the top of the tower to monitor Robert. While the three of them were tasked with searching for Robert's whereabouts.
Fuck. Ari, what's your sit rep?
In his search, Kovac entered a fishing shop. But when he was careless, Kovac was immediately shot by Robert using a spear. After that, Ari found Kovac dead and rushed through the houses to find Robert. He then found a row of photos of Susan that Robert had put up. And when he was careless, Robert immediately stabbed him several times with a karambit. After finding Ari's body, Resnick followed Robert's footsteps and entered the bakery owned by Robert's dead wife. But as soon as he entered, suddenly there was a bomb which quickly blew up the bakery.
President!
Now only Dave is left at the top of the tower. Dave then received radio communication from Robert, who said that he would kill Dave. But Dave didn't lose his mind, and he told Robert that he had hidden the Miles in the trunk of the car. And if Robert doesn't appear, then Miles will die.
Side mirror. Time's up, man!
However, when Miles was about to aim at the trunk, Robert first shot the car tire, which made the bullet miss.
Fuck you!
After that, Robert went up to the tower and started fighting with Dave. In that fight, Robert managed to kill Dave and dropped him into the ocean. After that, Robert freed Miles and saw Miles shot in the leg. He then took Miles to his old house, where he treated his wounds and stopped the bleeding.
Pissed.
I'll talk to her.
After that, Miles looked at Robert's photos, as well as photos with his wife, Vivian. Long story short. A few days later, Miles lived his normal life as a good student. Meanwhile, Fatima was amazed by the mural painting created by Miles. Meanwhile, old grandfather Sam at the beginning of the film finally reunites with his sister, Magda. And of course all this thanks to Robert's help. And the movie is over. Thank you for watching. Look forward to the next video.